I can't wait for you to listen to the conversation that I have with Christopher Catisse, who lives in Utah, who is an author for a queer magazine, both a written publication, but it's online as well. So check the show notes so you can find access to that. And we talk about how he and his husband adopted their two boys and how they created their queer family. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am excited to introduce you to Christopher Catisse, who is an author and a parent. And I say he's an author because he writes a column for Q Salt Lake, and the column's titled, Who's Your Daddy? And I will have him tell us more about that later. But first, welcome, Christopher. Please tell everyone who you are and about the members of your family.
Sure. Hey, thank you so much, Sam, for having me on your program. I really appreciate it. As you said, my name is Christopher Catisse, and I live here in Salt Lake City, actually in a suburb of Salt Lake City called Murray. And I live with my husband of nearly 37 years, Kelly Huntington, and our two now adult children, Gus, who is 21, and Nico, who is 8.
You went into parenting a few years ago. Did you always want to be a dad?
You know, that's a great question. And the short answer is no. I was never one of those people who felt as if he didn't become a father, he would have an unfulfilled life.
Right.
My husband, Kelly, and I had a wonderful life in the years BC before children.
Right.
But the kids have made it better by far.
Right. And you don't know that until you get into it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And then they open it right up and you think, wow, how did I not know this?
And you also don't know how much you can love someone so weirdly and deeply who can make you so angry and so proud in a matter of seconds.
It is very, very true. You can go up and go down very quickly. And at the end of the day, you continue to love them. And that's what makes the healing happen, right? When you do get angry with them.
I guess so.
So 21 years ago, your eldest child was born. And to be fair, at that time, queer individuals weren't necessarily creating families for themselves as obviously as they are these days. And I say that, I don't mean to say that queer people couldn't have or shouldn't have had families, but we didn't see them represented socially in any of the shows we watch, in any of the social media, because let's be honest, 21 years ago, social media was pretty limited, that kind of thing. So how did you decide to become parents? Like, what path did you choose to become parents? Because it may have been limited at that time.
You're absolutely 100% right. We at the time lived in the California Bay Area, or San Francisco Bay Area, excuse me. We had lived in San Francisco for about 10 years and then purchased a home in Oakland, which for some of your listeners who may not know is the other side of San Francisco from the Bay Bridge. And occasionally you would see a couple, two gay men or two lesbian women with a child. But it was rare.
Mm-hmm.
And this journey, I think it's important, this journey is my journey. It's not necessarily the right journey for everyone. And I think there's no right or wrong way within reason for queer people to become parents. So it really started on Thanksgiving Day in the year 2000. And we were walking our dog, and she wanted to smell something on somebody's lawn. And it happens that we looked up, and there was this beautiful African-American family, dad, mom, I can't remember if there were two or three kids and an older female relative. And their dining room table was in the picture window, and they were all holding hands and they were saying grace over their holiday feast. And I thought it was a really sweet scene. Well,
Mhm.
unbeknownst to me, it triggers something in my husband, Kelly, because shortly thereafter, he's spending a lot of time on the computer. And not to be crass, very honestly, I thought he was like any other gay man and was just, looking at adult content. But it ended
Right.
up, yeah, right. It ended up that he was researching paths to parenthood for us.
Hmm.
We would come back to our home state of Utah, and we would see, our different families. We would see his brother, who he and his wife had 5 kids, and some of the older kids were already having little ones of their own. And Kelly wanted that, you know, chaos that comes with kids, that good chaos that comes with kids.
Hmm.
And so he sat me down, talked about it, talked about how he thought it was missing in our lives, and talked about the research he had done. And he eliminated surrogacy, which is fine for people because it was, for us, however, it was financially out of reach.
Right.
So that left a public adoption and private adoption. And private adoption can also be very costly. And as you know, whether you have a child biologically, whether it's through surrogacy or adoption, it's a roller coaster.
Right.
And it depends on what kind of roller coaster you like. Do you
Right.
want to be spun upside down and twisted? That's an option. So private adoption comes with a cost, but it also came with the unknown. Would a likely young woman want her child to go to, for us, two gay men? Or was she
Right.
looking for the picket fence, the dad who goes to work, the mom who makes apple pie kind of situation?
Right.
And would she, at the very moment, if she did choose you at the end, would she have a change of heart and keep
Right.
the baby?
Right.
The finances is, I think, what we said was going to be the barrier there for us. But I think deep down it was, we don't like that kind of roller coaster.
Right.
And so we went the public adoption route, which are kids who are in the foster care system
Hmm.
and are looking for permanent homes. So first you're a foster parent for that child, and then you become their parent. And we jokingly called the foster adopt program the rent to own program. So uh,
Fair.
we went to, yeah, fair, right? We went to the orientation,
Hmm.
and there were probably 150, maybe 200 people there. And during a break, I approached the facilitator, and rather defensively or preemptively, I was defensive and said, clearly we're a same gender couple.
Hmm.
Will we ever even get a chance to get a kid? And she looked at me rather disgustedly and said, why wouldn't you? We don't care what your living situation is. We're just after good parents.
Right. Yep.
And that started the process for us. We did a very intensive training program, and it was called MAP. And I remember this, I don't remember what it was called, what the acronym stands for.
Hmm.
And, it was 10 weeks of really hard introspection. I think it was more set up for people who were going to get older kids and particularly foster them long term. Uh, Kids who had been taken from the only families they'd known
Right.
and placed in a new situation, and how to deal with that. For like babies, there wasn't a lot of training for the babies. Although
Right.
interestingly enough, the county, and probably counties all around the United States and in all the provinces in Canada, probably
Hmm.
have this very similar idea, and that is there are certain rules, like you cannot physically discipline the child, and
Right.
you cannot deny the child food. So there's no going to bed without dinner.
Right.
Those were punishments that Kelly and I would never do.
Right.
I mean, that would never cross our
Just,
mind.
yeah, it just didn't
But
enter your mind. Yeah. But,
yeah, exactly. But for some people, that was the way they were raised.
right.
You're going to go to bed without dinner.
Hmm.
But for a kid who knows food insecurity,
Right.
that can be triggering. For a kid who has
100%.
been physically abused, a smack on the behind can be tra-
Yeah,
traumatizing and triggering.
absolutely. Yeah. And they
So
don't
that was the
know,
process.
right? When they start those classes and things like that with you, they don't know who you may end up meeting along the way. So they have to highlight
Absolutely.
everything, right?
Absolutely. And they had to talk a lot about loss. One of the exercises we did that was most impactful to me was loss. And there were two trainers. The facilitator of the orientation was one of them. And then the other was a long-term foster parent. And the conversation that took place about loss really impacted me. So they asked about somebody who had lost something. And there was some, mumblings, and I finally raised my eager little hand. And I was extraordinarily close with my paternal grandmother,
Mm.
who passed away when I was 20 years old. And she had left me a little pendant of Saint Barbara. Uh, and so I kept that with me at all times. And somewhere along the line, between the time I was 20 and the time I was 21 or 22, I lost it.
Oh.
And I went through all the stages of grief. I
Mm.
went through, the stage of denial and compromise and all the stages. And I thought that that was a great example.
Mhm.
And then the facilitator told us about her divorce. And then the trainer from foster care told us about how she had fostered a young boy and his sister from the time they were toddlers and never adopted them because the mother, even in her lowest points, who was struggling with addiction, even in her very lowest moments, would call and check in on the kids. And eventually, when the kids were in their early tweens, the mother had turned her life around, done what she needed to do, and regained custody of her children. And the foster mom had to give those kids back to the biological mother. And she said she knew that day was always going to come, or potentially was always going to come, but it was still a great loss. And then, if that didn't make everybody tear up enough, she
Right?
said that 5 or 6 months later, she ran into them in the grocery store, and the two little kids came running up to her and hugged her and said, "Mom, Mom." And she said, "No, no, I'm not your mom. She's your mom."
Right.
And their biological mother said, "No, I'm their mom only because you were their mom when they needed you. They are always going to call you mom."
Oh,
I know, right?
wow.
I'm thinking about it
I know I'm
23,
getting
4 years
goosebumps.
later.
Ugh. But
So,
that's
yeah.
that's the fear though, isn't it? I think when you get into
Oh,
the foster system and you are
oh,
fostering or adopting through the foster system, you're afraid because the root thought is reconciliation. Let's figure out how to get these children back with their parents, and that's your fear is you give your heart and soul to these people who and want to because these children deserve it, but then they go back to their parents and a piece of you is walking around outside your body.
so I will say, in our case, Alameda County,
Hmm.
which is home to like Berkeley and
Mm.
Oakland, they had only lost at the time had only lost on appeal one case of parental rights termination.
Oh,
So by the time the parental rights are terminated, you're pretty okay. I mean, there's an
right.
appeal process, but so up until you get that note that that date has come and that the rights were terminated and that the appeal period has ended, we
Mhm.
were on pins and needles.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you something else, and that was my father. We always teased that the part of Greece we're from is the Peloponnese, the southern part of mainland Greece, and we always joke for Peloponnesian witches. because we dream things or we think things and they happen, or something similar to that happens.
Hmm.
So, and I was completely crazy, but that's okay. Uh, my mom told my parents, my sister, and my brother came out to, or one of my brothers came out to Oakland when we adopted our oldest son to go to the adoption ceremony with us. And my mom took me aside and said, Dad did not sleep one wink last night. And I said, why? He said, he dreamed that the judge, that the mom showed up and that the judge gave custody to the mom and not you guys.
Oh.
And the baby's caseworker who placed him with us came to that ceremony because she liked us and we liked her.
Hmm.
And she said, oh, I got to tell you, I walked into my office today just because it's my day off, and I walked in just to check emails and voicemails. And there was a voicemail from his mom asking, hey, do I have any chance of getting my kid back? And she said, I just erased it because there wasn't and called
Right.
it good.
Right.
But so, right to the very end, my family was concerned subconsciously, and apparently it was, a thought in somebody else's mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the time you're at the adoption appointment, you have given your heart and soul to Gus. He's your
He,
child in your
he was
heart.
my son, absolutely. From
Yeah.
the, I have to, laugh. The very first time he spent the night. So in this the system here, at least, or there, you meet the kid, you hang out with him a little bit, you take him, you bring him home, then he spends the night one night and then comes back, and then he spends like a weekend and comes back, and then he's permanently placed. It's an ability to bond and for the
Hmm.
kid to get used, even a baby, and he was 7 months at this stage.
Hmm.
The the first night he spent in our house, I slept next to the crib, or the I would call it the cradle, I guess,
Yeah.
and kept my reaching out every like 20 minutes to make sure he was still breathing. So
Yep.
I was so
Sounds
concerned.
like parenting.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It was just like, is he still alive? Is he still alive? Is he still alive?
Yep.
And so, yeah, you absolutely, from the
Yeah.
moment he moved in, he was our kid.
Hmm. Yep. He
And
would
and
be.
I will say vice versa too. I will say vice versa. So here in the States on Thanksgiving was when he spent the long weekend. And in fact, we sheepishly asked his very wonderful foster mother, Shirley, unfortunately passed away, but asked you, would you mind if, like, rather than after work on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, if we could pick him up a little earlier? She was like, oh, hallelujah, I was going to ask you because I got so much to do. Could you come pick him up earlier? So we picked him up. We had a great weekend. We had to take him back on Sunday night, handed him over to Shirley, and he started crying and reaching out for us. And we felt so bad. And she said, this is perfect.
Yeah.
This is what I need to tell his worker. The baby's bonded with them.
Yeah.
So he was our kid. And in his little, baby mind, we were his parents.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Wow. And he was 7 months when he came to you. And he's
Yeah, he moved
21
in at seven
now.
months. Actually, yeah, he moved in. Actually, it was 21 years ago yesterday. And
Ooh.
I'm not, well, I'm not so um uh what is it, nostalgic, as it happened to be the date my dad's birthday,
Oh,
for whom for whom he is also named. So that's how I remember what day it was. And it was also the day he crawled for the first time.
just to have a couple of milestones in there, a few
Yeah,
reasons to
exactly.
remember.
Exactly. We were terrified he was never going to crawl, and a pediatrician finally said, crawling is not a milestone. Some kids never crawl. And his little brother was the same way. He's like, yeah, I'll start walking before I'm going to crawl.
They all do things on their own path. But speaking of his little brother, um,
Right.
how did you get to Nico? And um, was it a similar process?
So that's a great, great question. And it's honestly a fantastic story. So we had when Gus was not quite well a year and a half, uh, we made a move from the San Francisco Bay Area to Los Angeles. I'd taken a new job down there and we moved to LA.
Okay.
And after a couple of years, uh, we started thinking about another child. Oh, it's great to be an only child, nothing wrong with only children, but Kelly is number three of four, and I'm from a big, fat, crazy Greek family. I'm
Mm.
number six. I
Oh,
know the chaos.
yes, you do.
You know, I know the crazy, the wonderful craziness, the laughter. So we know the significance of siblings. And I'm particularly close with a couple of my siblings.
Right.
So we went to an orientation in Los Angeles, and Kelly followed through, and they had a very similar training uh,
Mm.
um, requirement. However, it was, and we said, well, we've already done it in Alameda. And they were like, oh, no, you need to do it here, even though it's far less intense. But
Oh,
whatever, that's fine. So
okay.
yeah, right. And they said, we don't have any coming anytime soon, but give us your name and number. We'll put you in our file, and we'll call you when we get the next training scheduled.
Okay.
Well, that was 20, yeah, 19 years ago, and we're still
Mhm.
waiting for that call.
Oh, I
So
wouldn't
in
hold
the
your breath
meantime,
then.
right? Yeah, I think by now we're going to say no, thank you.
Right. Changed our minds.
Yeah, seeing the gray hairs we have. Uh, so one day I'm at work and Kelly calls, and it is literally 18 years ago, and almost 19 years ago. And he calls and says, "So I just got a call from Alameda County. Gus has a brother." And I was like, "What?" And evidently, their mother, the boys share a common mother but different biological fathers, and
Okay.
now they have a common mother and the same two dads. So you can go figure.
There you go.
But there you go, right? Um, so the mother had a child. The county took the child, and he was born in Alameda County.
Okay.
And so I immediately found the telephone number of the woman who had placed Gus with us and asked her what in the world was going on. Was she even legally able to tell me anything about what was happening?
Right.
And she got back with me and said that she was no longer in placement. She had become a parental rights termination supervisor. She said
Okay.
a file came across my desk. I'm looking at it and I go, hey, I know this lady. That's Gus's little brother. So she went to the worker and the person whose job it is to find family, because if a child has been taken from a parent, the first people they try to contact are biological family members,
Right.
grandparents, the parents, siblings, aunt, uncles, to keep the family together, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, there's a person whose job it is to find those people. So the worker, her name was Svetlana. Svetlana told the baby's worker and told the investigator, hey, this kid has a sibling that has been adopted out of the system. Here's their names. Try to find them and see if they will be willing to be, quote, unrelated next of kin and have the baby placed with them.
Oh,
Well, about 3 days later, she runs into the investigator and says, have you seen, were you able to get that telephone number? And the fellow said, no, they seem to have fallen off the face of the earth as if they never existed.
oh,
And she told me 15 minutes later, I handed him Kelly's cell phone number. That is how we became a family.
excellent.
And
Excellent.
as far as falling off the face of the planet, Googling my name, and very frankly, my surname is not Smith or Johnson or
Right.
Jones or Papadopoulos. There are very few of us in this country with my surname.
Yes.
Would have taken her right to where I work and a telephone number, but we
Wow.
fell off the face of the earth. So, yeah, that's the way it was. And I will tell you that when Gus graduated high school, we took a picture, and he and his little brother chose to go to a charter school, which is a public school, but it is not like a neighborhood school. And this
Right.
was the Utah Military Academy. And the
Oh,
irony of two hippie dads, their kids going to a military academy was hysterical. But we took a
yeah.
picture at graduation, and there's between the two of us, and there he is, a young man, and he's got his dress uniform on, looking very handsome. And I sent that photo to Svetlana
Oh.
and said, "Thank you for making us a family." And she was like, "Oh, first of all, I can't believe how gorgeous he is. Secondly, I can't believe he's a grown up,
Mhm.
And she goes, and Nico's not far behind him. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. And the fact that she still had contact information and knew where to pull that contact information out to be able to facilitate then you meeting Nico. Now, but you were living in LA at the time, and this is in Alameda County, you're saying. So how
Yes.
did they?
So I was, yeah. So uh, once it was determined that we would take him, that we wanted to adopt him,
Mhm.
uh, I got a call one day, and they said, "Okay, the baby is coming down." And my parents happened to be visiting because it was very close to Gus's fourth birthday,
Okay.
and they decided to stay. And this is kind of funny. I find it funny. I don't know if Kelly would tell you it's funny, but we used to have a very inexpensive foam love seat in our bedroom that our dog slept on, right? And being a typical little boy, Gus loved to jump from Gracie's bed onto Daddy and Papa's bed. And it was even more fun if Papa grabbed him as he jumped in midair and tossed him onto the bed.
Okay.
Well, in doing, I
Oh.
was getting dressed for work. They're playing the jumping game. I hear a loud thud. I walk out. Kelly is on his butt on the floor with a 4-year-old Gus looking down at me saying, "Papa, okay?" He had thrown his back out. So I
Oh
came home from work.
no.
My parents were there. My dad said, "Somebody's got to stay with him." So my dad stayed with Kelly. My mom and I and Gus went to the airport. The worker, a different worker, came down the escalator, came right up to me, said, "You must be Christopher," and handed me the baby. Didn't ask for ID, but I think she probably had seen me before.
Oh, okay.
But said, "Yeah, I hope, I don't know," handing out babies left and right. And our first, there's a photo of us, and I'm introducing not yet Nico to his brother Gus, and the look in his eye, my mom says, it's like, "Where the hell have you been, big brother?" It is just a perfect like
Oh,
connection for them.
yes.
And then we came home, and I guess now they can't arrest me for this. We broke the law by leaving the baby and with my parents, who had not been cleared by California,
Oh,
by Alameda nor Los Angeles County, and I
right.
took Kelly to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor guy. Poor guy. How old
But
was
I
Nico when
will
he
to,
came to you?
so he was also 7 months. We found out about him a little earlier in life, but I
Mhm.
wanted to ensure that um, developmental milestones had been met and
Right.
that his physical health was okay.
Right.
Some people have a little bit of pushback with that, but
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, this kid in Alameda is nothing to me.
Right.
His big brother is my world.
Mhm.
We're gone if his big brother is has to take care of another human being. That's
Mhm.
not fair to my son." So we
Right.
waited for all of the milestones. All of them were wonderful. He was about 7 months, not quite 7 months, when he moved into our house. And now he's a big strapping fellow.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well. And that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information. It is forward thinking. I think that especially when we're in the queer community and we have to do so much to be able to have a family, because it isn't just something that happens without planning and expectations and finance usually, and all kinds of other variables that have to come into play. To be able to say confidently, do you know what though? I appreciate the family I have. Would I love to grow it? Sure. But what comes first is my existing family, and I know what my boundaries are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of that, um, their mother had a very difficult life and childhood and made choices or had decisions that she felt she had to do.
Mhm.
And I would very much advise any listener who's thinking about going through a public or private adoption
Mhm.
not to judge the parents
Oh no.
because you've not walked in their shoes.
Mhm.
However, because of some of the choices she has made, we wanted to ensure that there wasn't going to be an HIV situation
Right.
or any other situation with that infant, this child.
Yeah.
And I did know that you can get false positives or negatives from a mother to child.
Mhm.
And so I actually reached out to the Gay Men's Health Center in New York City, explained the situation. They echoed your forward thinking. They're like, you're right. Your kid is your responsibility. This kid is not your responsibility. And
Right.
there was at a time a new test that could be done. And I am remiss in the fact that I can't remember if it actually checks for the virus itself, not the antibodies, I think.
Okay.
And I called the worker and I said, this is what we need to have done before we can move forward.
Mhm.
Nothing happened. About 2 weeks later, she called Kelly and said, so I was just at a conference and I learned about this new test that checks for the virus itself, not the antibodies. Would you like that done? And Kelly was like, you mean the same test that Christopher told you about like 2 weeks ago? So, I mean, we needed that kid to be healthy.
Right.
Now, I will say his foster mom, who also tragically passed away not long after he moved in with us, uh, a loving woman and had a terrible habit from a parental standpoint, from my parenting standpoint.
Right.
He would go, and she would pick that kid up.
Mm.
So he was used to being coddled a lot. And that first night, new house, new
Mhm.
surroundings, again, just 6 months, 6.5 months old, whatever, uh, cried and cried and cried. And my mom finally came out and said, there's absolutely no reason for all of us to get no sleep. You got to work in the morning, go. And he spent his first night in our family sleeping on his yaya's chest in an easy chair.
Love it. If that's what
Right?
it
It's
takes,
better than
right?
that.
And he's
He's
still
also, I mean,
probably pretty connected to her, right?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I will tell you that when we found out about Gus, when we first decided now it's time to say, I was more cautious
Hmm.
about it than Kelly was. Uh, my parents were not unsupportive, but they also said, "Hey, look at the great life you have."
Hmm.
And my dad was concerned, and again, he spent his entire life here in Utah. Think about a kid who has two dads and how he might be teased and how he might be treated, which was a really honestly fair
Hmm.
uh, comment to make. We were counted like we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so it's not a problem.
Mhm.
When I did call and we had this conversation, and I said I'd really like to follow Greek tradition and name him after you. And then, whatever, 10 months later, my dad sat at the table in the judge's chambers or in the courtroom with us, daring that judge not to grant us parenthood. Those two, the two Gus's, were thick as thieves, as was Nico with his grandparents.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're very lucky, very, very lucky,
Mhm.
that everybody has just been. I mean, both of our families. Uh, it, it's no secret who the favorite grandkids were.
But I mean, that family, when you are connected to your family the way that you are, knowing that you have the support of your family for your children is a huge piece of the whole family creation process too, right?
Absolutely, and one of the most important lessons they taught us in that training was know your family. And it doesn't just mean each other, but do you have that support?
Mhm.
Can you call on a sibling or your grandparents or whatever to help you? That was never an issue for me. Once I got past the trepidation of saying, "Hey, guess who's going to be a dad?" Uh, Everybody embraced, wholeheartedly embraced. And when we moved back to Utah, it just went through the roof. I mean, my sister would fly out to Los Angeles and take Gus and fly him back to Salt Lake and spend a week with my parents.
Oh.
And I do have to say that when he was in preschool, one of the other parents said to Kelly, "Wait, what? Your kid will spend a week with your in-laws without you?" And Kelly's response was, "Who wouldn't want to spend a week with Willy Wonka?"
Right.
So they get plenty of, they've always been really spoiled. I used to joke that my sister, who's also their godmother, uh, was incapable of saying the word no to those two children.
Hmm. Yeah.
And in fact, at a pediatrician's once, the doctor asked Nico if he eats well. And the kid loves salad. Even as a little kid, loved salads,
Yeah.
whatever. But he said, "Yeah, but sometimes Grandpa, sometimes Papu gives me wine and butter." And
Oh,
I was like, "What?" And the doctor started laughing. "Well, that's what Papus are for."
thank goodness though, right? I love
So
that.
I
That's
don't, I
awesome.
don't, I know he'd give him butter, but I don't know about the wine.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, out of the mouths of babes.
Right?
And and this actually, that's a nice segue into this column you write. Can you tell me a little bit more about your
Sure.
column? Because, I mean, feeding children butter and is one thing, feeding children wine is another. I mean, it's a parenting advice column. Do you advise against the wine part or?
Um, uh, well, I'll preface that with saying about 8 years ago or so, I was going to Greece to visit some cousins and took my kid with me. And he was 13, Gus was 13.
Mhm.
And while we were on the flight from Amsterdam to Athens, a flight attendant stopped and put in front of Gus a small Heineken. And Gus looked at me and I looked at him and we looked at the beer and we looked at the flight attendant and said, "What's this?" And the flight attendant was, "Well, didn't he order that?" I'm like, "He's 13." He said, "So does he not want it?" And the poor
Oh,
flight attendant was so baffled, I ended up drinking a beer I did not want.
well,
So yeah, I would advise careful about the alcohol.
right,
Well, the
right.
column is called, yeah, right. It's called "Who's Your Daddy?" And the publisher and the editor of the magazine is a fellow whom I've known since we were quite young. I was 19 and he was 21. I throw that in there because, Michael, you're older than me. So I'd seen it. We had just moved back to Salt Lake. We had reconnected through social media. We had lunch, and I said, "I think you need a parenting column." And he said, I think that's a great idea. And why don't you write something for me and let me take a look at it? And I said, oh my God, you're making me do a writing test? You know what I do for a living. I'm in marketing communications and public relations. He said, I still need to see a writing test. So I wrote my initial column. I think it was called Coming Out as a Gay Dad, talking about how I've not ever really been terribly closeted.
Right.
I, family knew, my family in Europe knew, my clients knew, whatever. But coming out as a dad became a whole new experience for me. And over the past 15 years, once a month, I write about everything from just what the boys are doing. Like the current column that will come out actually next month is about raising good men in this particular time of the United States' history and being decent and kind people. Others have been about awkwardly standing at a pediatrician's office while they try to determine whether the guy with the goatee or the 6 foot tall all-star little league pitcher is the person they should put as the mother
Oh, oh,
on the form, right? I will say that pediatrician, I raised that subject with him. The next appointment we had, he said, I talked to the partners about it. We agree wholeheartedly. We'll use what we still have, and the new ones will say parent and parent.
yeah, yeah.
So that was great. It deals with those kinds of bullying. Like, for example, there was a kid when my son was 13, and we had a little like spontaneous birthday party, who was a good friend of his from school, was not allowed to come to the party because of his parents' deeply held religious beliefs. But hey, our kid could always go to their house. So it dealt with those kinds of things and the awkwardness.
Yeah.
And you're a mom, you
Yeah.
have never experienced this.
No.
But I bet the men who listen to your podcast, who are dads, have. I will tell you, I was just before baby Gus, now adult bearded man Gus, was moved into our house. I was friendly with a guy I knew from the gym, who I also knew professionally. Nice guy. He turned to me one day and said, hey, do you mind if I give you advice? And all people are probably giving you a ton of advice, but can I just give you some advice? And I said, absolutely. I'm never going to turn down advice. He said, be prepared to have people think you are the most incompetent human being on the planet.
Yeah.
And I went, what do you mean? And he goes, the way dads are treated. And he told me how every Saturday morning he took his 2 kids and they went to breakfast, and it was time for them to just have something to do together. And it gave his wife a chance to sleep in and do whatever she wanted, right?
Sure.
And one day, sitting at the restaurant, the server brings their plates and then says to him, do you want me to cut the kids' meat for them? And he was like, I think I've got it.
Yeah, you probably
Those
handle
kinds
that.
of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say that I was coming to Salt Lake with Gus for my dad's 80th birthday, and I put him on the place where you get the little carry-alls to take his shoes off. And I'm taking his shoes off, and a TSA agent came running up to me and said, "Sir, do not put your child through the X-ray machine." And I laughed because clearly that's a joke.
Right.
Except she wasn't joking. She reiterated it very sternly.
Yeah.
I've had servers wipe my kid's face for us. So we've written about those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my pet peeve, and it's the pet peeve not just of gay dads, but of straight dads too. You cannot babysit your own child.
You are the parent. You are parenting.
We
I
get it all
fully
the
agree.
time. Oh,
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
yeah, you babysitting for mom today? I mean, not any longer because again, they're bulky
Right.
men
Right. Well,
who
but
eat
it
their own
is
body weight every 10 minutes.
right. But it is true. You're right. And it is a deeply held belief system. And I guess that's another question that I have is that do you find that I mean you're in Utah, there's a stereotype about living in the proverbial Bible Belt and being a gay parent. Like how do you feel like that is received? Do you feel like that's been just universally okay where you are, or have you felt like you've met with resistance? And do you think that you've met with more resistance than a lesbian might as a parent because you're a gay dad?
You know, that is something I've never, that, the comparison of a gay man to a lesbian woman, I've never thought about before. But probably, I will say we had one teacher who when the kids were little, I outed us because I thought it was incredibly important that that teacher know,
Mhm.
so that it's not a weird situation if they said, Nico, what does your mommy, make for dinner? And have him say, I don't have a mom.
Right.
So one woman was not taken aback by it, but she kind of bristled and asked us if he lived with both of us. And I said, yeah.
Mhm.
And she said, well, because last year I had a lesbian couple and they were breaking up and it was just a big nightmare. But I guess that doesn't really have anything to do with you. Well, no, don't know the lesbians, so
Yeah. Well, yeah.
can't really comment on it. I will say that Utah is known as a very conservative and a
Mhm.
predominantly Mormon state,
Mhm.
although Salt Lake City and indeed the state itself is no longer majority LDS. Uh, a few years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, the Mormon church put down a doctrine that said the children of same gendered couples could not fully participate in the religion. They could not be baptized. They could not do whatever other things they do. They could not take their communion, I guess. I don't know, all those
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
until they were adults, and at which time they denounced their parents' marriage. And I got a lot of people calling in and checking in with me. I am not
Yeah.
LDS. I've never been LDS. My family's not LDS.
Right.
Kelly is not LDS. His family's not LDS. So I looked at it in a different way. I
Mhm.
looked at it as what the Mormon Church it does is their business, just like what the Greek Orthodox Church to which I belong,
Mhm.
what they do is its business. The Baptists, what they do is its business. It does not impact me, and I think we're making um, a big deal out of something that impacted some people and hurt some people very, very much. But
Right.
overall, not that many people. It was blown out of proportion. They did reverse that. They had thousands of people leave their church. Now, to be very honest, people who are not active members, had
Right.
someone like Steve Young, who was a professional American football player, had he left the church, or had Mitt Romney left the church, that would have been a completely different situation. But
Right.
the guy down the street who hasn't been to church in 10 years, nobody cares about.
Right.
But we get that kind of their ideal of family, which is their right, and there's nothing wrong with it. They do. LDS folks are wonderful and do wonderful work.
Mhm.
Their ideal family is not my ideal family.
Right.
My church's ideal family is not my ideal family. But I will tell you a little bit different. And that is that the day that whatever it was, a doctrine proclamation was read, my boys served as altar boys at Prophet Elias Greek Orthodox Church. And then there was a Boy Scout pancake breakfast fundraiser. And they were all the kids were serving, right?
Mhm.
And they're the same troop that their dad was in. And as they're passing out, having been altar boys, and as they're passing out pancakes, two of the people they passed pancakes out were to their two fathers. So it was kind of a night and
Mhm.
day for me there. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So when Gus was baptized, uh, I had to leave. The priest who was supposed to do the baptism had a family emergency. I had to go like the very next day on a business trip. Kelly went back to California because we were packing up to move to Los Angeles. The boy the young man now stayed with my parents, right? And so
Right.
my mom took the baptismal certificate to the church when the priest returned from his family emergency so he could be signed. And the priest said, okay, Christopher, where's Christopher born? Salt Lake City. And he said, what's his wife's name? Now, my mom could have simply said Kelly and left it at that.
Right.
However, my mom, being my mom, said, Gus doesn't have a wife. Gus has two dads. Got a problem with that? And Father Mike said, no, I don't. I just didn't know. What's his name? Where was he born? And I didn't know about this story until we had moved back to Utah. We had Nico baptized. I was in his office and he's filling out the form. And he said, oh, let me tell you the story about your mom. And then he said, this is your church and I am your priest. And if Kelly wants a church and Kelly wants a priest, this is his church and I am his priest too.
Right.
So
wow.
We were lucky to have that. We sent our kids to a parochial Greek Orthodox parochial preschool and early elementary school. And it, you know, I like to tell a story that there was a fundraiser and I was the masters of ceremonies for it. And we had brought in a beautiful young woman, a singer to entertain. And afterwards I was standing up saying something and she put her arm around me and I had my arm around her. And I said, Kelly, quick, take a photo and we'll send it to the people in Greece. And they'll say, we knew that white guy was just a phase. And everyone laughed. And she hugged me and I hugged her kind of thing. Oh. And then I spent a week, 2 weeks being scolded by all the old Greek ladies who love Kelly. So we have been lucky. We have been embraced. And again, know your family. We knew that we've been embraced and are incredibly, incredibly grateful for that. I think in fact, I wrote once about the crazy Greek life in my column. And one of the greatest gifts, I don't know if they know this yet, but one of the greatest gifts the boys ever received was being welcomed by the Greek community of Salt Lake with open arms as two of their own.
Mm. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty.
And we also needed, so we needed to give them an identity beyond their dad's sexuality. Sure. Beyond being the kids with two dads.
Yeah. No, because our sexuality is only just one piece of who we are. And too many people spend too much time focusing exclusively on that. And then they miss the other amazing parts of us that make us full humans.
Do you remember there was I believe he was an Episcopalian. He was the first openly gay Episcopalian bishop. I don't know what happens when you're a bishop. Consecrated, became a bishop. And he was on Larry King and somebody called and said, what do you and your husband do in bed? And he said, oh my God, at our age, we sleep. And I said, what do you get to bed? We sleep. we elbow each other too, because there's a rumor I snore. I have facts that he does.
Yes, yes. Oh, it's true. What goes on behind closed doors is really no one's business. But people like to think it's more boring than people think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh boy, Kelly and I have been together for going on 37 years.
Yeah.
That's boring.
Yeah. Because what you do is just live.
Yeah, exactly. We fight, we argue, we have an ongoing heated discussion about the temperature of the house. I'll simply say the boy needs to live life on the equator.
Yeah, that would be me. Yeah, although at the moment we seem to be on the same page. Oh,
I'm like 68 is fine. 68 is perfect.
Oh, that's a little chilly for me.
But yeah, anyway, it has been the greatest, most frustrating, most rewarding, most frightening experience I could have ever dreamed of. There was nothing It was nothing like I expected it, and it was oh so much more.
I love that. I love that. And ultimately, I like to end every episode by just asking, do you have a favorite part? What is your favorite part of parenting? I mean, they're grown men now, but I mean, what's your favorite part of the whole journey?
Oh gosh, that is such a great question, Sam. Uh, when they were little, so can I do a twofer? Because
Of course.
when they were little, my favorite part of parenting was the um the awe of it all,
Hmm.
right? So like I asked my son Gus if he remembered the very first movie I took him to was Horton Hears a Who. And he saw kids leaving and they all had these like elephant ears, right, on their
Hmm.
little heads. And he was so excited when he got a pair of those ears. And like when Nico's very first trick or treating, right? We went to my parents' neighborhood, rang, did the neighbors. The third door, ring the door, they trick or treat, get candy. He opens his bag, sees the candy, turns to me and says, "Hey, this is a really good idea." Like I had invented Halloween.
I love that.
Right? And now that they are uh, awesome, decent, kind, frustrating, uh, angering young men, the best part of that is seeing whom they have become
Yeah.
and whom they are going to become.
Yeah.
That's been incredible,
Mhm.
absolutely incredible. Like just they're boys, so we make fun of each other,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we do the kind of boy things, but they're so kind.
Mhm.
Not always to me, not always to Papa, not always to Dad, but
Yeah.
but they're always kind to other people,
Yeah.
and that to me, I think that's a parenting win.
Absolutely. That's definitely a reflection of what they've seen you exhibit. And so, that's where you pat yourself on the back for that.
Well, I don't know if it was more nurture or nature, but they're 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 good men.
Yeah.
And the 18-year-old has some growing up to do still, but so did I at 18, and so did
Yeah.
his brother at 18.
Yeah.
But I know where he's gonna end up. I see the end. At least I hope I see the end. But they're good men, and
Yeah.
that you can't ask for anything better than that.
No.
Especially like I said, in this stage of where my country is,
Yeah.
um, we need good men
Yeah.
and women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do want to leave, I'll just give you one more glimpse if I may. I
Sure.
asked Gus when he was 15 years old, 14, 15 years old. So you ask a girl out and she says no, what do you do? And he said, well, I'd say thanks and walk away. He goes, well, maybe I wouldn't say thanks, but what am I going to do? Be a dick about it?
Mm.
And I knew right then who he was going to be as a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need more like that. We need more people like that, not just men, but
People.
people. Yeah.
Exactly.
We need more
My
people like
experiences
that.
with men.
Yeah.
My,
Yeah.
we always joke that when people said, didn't you want a daughter? Yeah, sure, I would have loved a daughter, but at the same time, I know what that would have been. That
Yeah.
little girl would have had two adult men wrapped around her little pinky. She wouldn't have been a princess, should have been the empress. So it was probably good that we didn't get a girl.
Well, know your strengths, right?
Exactly.
Oh, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and tell the world about your family creation journey. And sure, your family was created a while ago, as was mine, but these are still the stories we need to hear and the hope that we get to have from stories like yours. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to encourage everybody who's going down that journey. It's your journey, no wrong or right. Don't be afraid.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thank you. As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable paths and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.